Committee is considering the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill 2019 and amendments on sheet 8699, moved by Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. The reality is that proposals to make aviation safer are already limited by what is affordable. If a regulation doubles the cost of travel and makes it 1% safer, does anybody here seriously think cost is not worth considering? If a regulation can save $1 and maintain the same level of safety, it should be supported. Every regulation should be assessed for the costs and the benefits. Right now, the legislation is geared only to how regulations impact on safety. The reality is that cost always has to be considered. The legislation pretends that it doesn't, but it is a legal fiction. It makes you feel safe, but it doesn't keep you safe. If the only consideration was cost, every seat on an aircraft would be fitted with an ejection capsule. Every second row would be filled with air security officers from the AFP. You'd require every plane to replace every 5 years, just in case. And every one of these changes would make air travel safer. But every one of these changes would send the sector broke in the process. These safety standards have not been adopted because the costs aren't worth the benefit. Cost is always considered. Cost is already being considered. But the Civil Aviation Act does not recognise it's happening or allow for it to happen. Safety matters, and nobody is arguing it doesn't. But every safety decision ends up being paid for by the end user. Some operators are already being squeezed out by ever-increasing costs, and every new regulation adds to the price of doing business in that sector. The impact of these changes is regressive. It hurts people on low incomes the most, because they are the ones least able to absorb the high prices of the ticket. The impact of these changes also hurts the bush more than anywhere else. Small-town air services are shutting down because the cost of staying open is too expensive for them to maintain. This pushes people off planes and onto roads. Is that really safe? Is that really safer for the traveller? Oh, my paper's stuck together. People are driving on roads that aren't as well maintained, in vehicles that aren't as well regulated, with a licence that isn't as difficult to obtain. And in the name of safety, these amendments ensure that safety remains a priority, but not the only priority. This reflects what should be common sense. Making safety decisions without thinking about cost simply leads to businesses with superb safety records being driven into closure. These amendments retain the commitment to safety but recognise that CASA has a responsibility to strike a balance. A plane in a hangar may be safe, but that's not what planes are meant for. It's not the job of the regulator to ground every aircraft in the country. It should be the job of the regulator to keep aircraft in the air and keep passengers and pilots safe while they're there. And that is what these amendments seek to do. I urge my colleagues in the Senate to support them.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, very much. And I do thank Senator Lambie for her contribution, and as she places a lot of effort into these things, as she has with this. Just on Senator Lambie's proposed amendments there, I think it's important to put on record that the view of the government is that Senator Lambie's first proposed amendment would compromise safety as it would create ambiguity within the Act, and that ambiguity would be created by obscuring safety as the sole most important consideration for CASA in undertaking its safety and regulatory functions. And Senator Lambie's other amendment, which has been raised by the Pilots Association, does not improve the bill and could in fact lead to further ambiguity. So I just place those points on record just with regard to those proposed amendments, but I do thank Senator Lambie for her contribution on that. Just in general, though, there's been many contributions made to this debate, and we thank the opposition and Senator Patrick for their support of the bill. With regard to the key concern raised by Senator Rice, I think it's important to stress on behalf of government that safety will remain the most important consideration by CASA in all of this. So I do thank the Senate and commend the bill.
Senator Watt.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I just want to take the opportunity to put the opposition's position on these amendments on the record. And we won't be supporting the amendment being moved by Senator Lambie, and I might also take the opportunity to explain why we opposed the amendment moved by Senator Rice, and they're basically related reasons. But more broadly, when it comes to aviation safety, the position the opposition and Labor have tried to take is a bipartisan one. This bill has been around for some period of time, and prior to the election we worked with the government to strike what we thought was an appropriate balance between safety, which of course is absolutely vital and must always be CAS's paramount responsibility. So balancing that on the one hand, safety on the one hand, and easing the burden of red tape on small aviation operators on the other hand. We've worked very closely with the government to try to improve this, and we believe that the bill, as it now stands, moves us closer to achieving this balance. We're aware that the government's bill was developed in close consultation with the general aviation industry over a number of months in 2018 and also earlier this year. Now, we fully understand what Senator Lambie is seeking to achieve with her amendments, and as I understand it, it's to give assurance to small aviation operators that excessive safety regulation will not put their viability at risk. That is a worthwhile objective, and we understand where Senator Lambie is coming from. However, we do think that the intent of the amendment from Senator Lambie is already captured in the government's bill. From our perspective, the bill is seeking to balance safety with the risk, environment and cost involved, particularly for smaller operators. And while we understand that there will always be groups in the community that say that a particular piece of legislation gets the balance wrong one way or another, and no piece of legislation will ever be perfect, on balance we think that this bill does get us closer to achieving that important balance between safety and the impact on smaller aviation operators. So that's why, on balance, we have decided to support the bill without the amendment being put forward by Senator Lambie. And it's really a similar reason that explains why we opposed the amendment moved by Senator Rice. Again, we think that the bill, as put, does get the balance right. We don't think that it's necessary to refer it to an inquiry, and that's why we're prepared to support it as it currently stands and voted against Senator Rice's amendment as well. Now, of course, the opposition will continue to monitor the implementation of the bill, and if we think that it hasn't got that balance right, and if we think that there are additional reforms necessary, then of course we'd be willing to look at it and make further amendments as required. So, as I say, I just thought it was important for us to put on the record why we've taken this position in opposing both of the amendments tonight.
Senator Rice.
Thanks, Acting Deputy President. The Greens will be supporting Senator Lambie's amendments. We still don't think they make this bill something that we will support overall, but they do, at least, we feel, are an improvement on trying to reach what I understand is the intent of the bill, of removing bureaucratic measures that actually don't improve safety and reducing costs by doing that. But we feel that this bill, as it stands, is still very ambiguous as to whether indeed safety remains the prime consideration, and whether indeed, with or without Senator Lambie's amendment, that we will be actually reducing our safety standards. I mean, Senator Watt, in his summing up then, said that they felt that the bill was going to balance safety with the risk, environment and cost, which of its very self says that you are going to be weighing up economic and social factors and potentially reducing your safety standards. And we continue to be very concerned about that.
The question is that the amendments be agreed to. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I think the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells.